Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Our co-host, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, is out today for the Christmas holidays. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, great attorney, essayist, commentator, Eric Levine. Eric, I want to start today's conversation by talking about the craziness, the foolishness, the naivete, the dangerousness of some dissident Republicans making noises they will not support Speaker Michael Johnson for re-election to the speakership because they didn't like what he did with respect to the continuing resolution. And the question I pose to you, are these people so totally naive, so foolish, to endanger the future of this country, the stability of this country, undermine the Trump agenda, which they're supposed to be supporting, undermine a very fine leader, Michael Johnson, and make the same mistake they made when they sabotaged and killed Kevin McCarthy's speakership? I mean, what is wrong with these people? Don't they understand they're empowering the Democrats, especially the left-wing Democrats? And Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, has already made it clear there will not be one Democratic vote supporting Johnson's reelection. And you don't hear anything from the so-called no-label Democratic members of the House. And all those millions of dollars they get, because they're supposed to be beyond partisanship, doesn't stop them from following the party line that's set down by Jeffries. So I'm very troubled by this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think what we have here is a group of people who more belong in an insane asylum than in Congress. If they haven't learned the lesson from what happened with Kevin McCarthy, as you point out, they're just not educable. But I think what you really have here is a group of people that want to draw attention to themselves and believe in self-aggrandizement and really don't care about the country. They really don't care about any particular issue. They just care about perfection in their mind. And if you don't agree with them on 100% of every issue, then you are the enemy. You are a rhino. There's no reasonable debate. There's no idea that anybody could reasonably disagree. So we're going to burn it all down. It's crazy. I mean, Matt Gaetz is the perfect example of that. He really got his comeuppance. He's the one who brought down Kevin McCarthy. And then he really thought he was riding high when Trump nominated him to be Attorney General. There was no way the Senate was ever going to approve him. And then what is traditionally the rule in the House, he was under an ethics investigation. And once you're out of the House, they typically won't release the results of an investigation. But this is a guy who burned so many bridges, who alienated so many people that the House released it anyway. And what do we find out? We find out he slept with underage women, which of course is a strict liability crime. We find out that he was using drugs, paying for sex. But I'm not saying that this is the case with all these other people that are trying to burn it to the ground, but you think you would learn something. But here's the practical reality of what happens if they really want to think it through. And I know thought is very difficult to these groups. On January 6th, the Congress is supposed to confirm the vote of the presidential election. And on January 3rd, the House is seated. And then on January 3rd, the first act of what they're supposed to do is elect a speaker. And until a speaker is elected, no other business can be conducted.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
So if Mike Johnson is not elected, there's no one that anybody's pointing to that's going to take his place. So there will be no speaker on January 6th. So if there is no speaker on January 6th, there's no way to certify the election. Donald Trump cannot be seated as president, and J.D. Vance cannot be seated as vice president. And in the line of succession, the Speaker of the House is third, but there is no Speaker of the House. So the fourth person in succession is the Speaker pro tem of the Senate, and that is Chuck Grassley. So if on January 6th the election isn't certified, and there's no speaker before January 20th, Donald Trump can't become president. And all these great things that we all voted for, that we all prayed for and wished for would happen, will not happen. And it could be that Chuck Grassley becomes president. Now, I agree that this is far-fetched, but these people are so foolish, are so self-destructive, so self-absorbed, you have no idea what they're going to do. If they insist that Mike Johnson does not become speaker, who knows what we're going to have. But I also want to just add this and be very clear. Mike Johnson is spectacular.
Absolutely.
He's a spectacular speaker. He's a man with a strong moral compass. He puts the country first. And he, more than any of these other fools, want to advance the Trump agenda on securing the border, on bringing down inflation, on rebuilding our military. He is the one that wants to do all this. I have no idea what these other people's plans are, but all I hear is, if you don't support Trump's agenda and all his appointees, we're going to primary you. You know what? Stop it. Enough with the circular firing squads. Republicans have to be able to prove that we can govern. And if we can't prove we can govern, in 2006, 2 short years away,
2026, right? 2026.
Hakeem Jeffries is going to be
the Speaker
of the House. But this insanity has to stop.
Well, let me give you my comment on this. These people don't seem to understand loyalty to the institution because you don't want to have chaos in the institution of the House of Representatives. They don't understand their obligations to go forward and to certify the election of presidency. They don't understand that you should never make the perfect the enemy of the good. They don't understand that if they have this chaos, who's going to drive Trump's agenda through? And you're going to have delays on getting Trump's agenda through, if at all. The clock to do it is really a limited clock because of the 2-year cycle with the congressional elections, the House elections, which means you really have maybe a year and a half to get the business done. So it's very, very important. Meanwhile, our enemies externally are laughing because they can now do all kinds of crazy gimmicks to make our lives miserable, as they have been over the last 4 years, and be adventurous and dangerous. We have a worldwide fight against terrorism, illegal immigration. These are all things that have to be done with. You don't make the perfect enemy of the good, as the ancient Greeks say. And let's be clear. Johnson had no choice on this continuing resolution because otherwise they'd have to shut down the government. And that would have been a problem, and you would have had the same fight at the beginning of the year. So you had to have a continuing resolution to go forward. Now, let me suggest to President-elect Trump, and it's very hard to, criticize a man who's been able to make himself very wealthy and become president for 2 terms. But let me suggest to him, he doesn't understand basic politics. What he should be doing now is taking every single member of the House caucus who's a Republican for a walk around the block, for a game of golf, for breakfast, for dinner, for lunch, for a visit at Mar-a-Lago, whatever he has to do to line them up. They should all be voting unanimously for Mike Johnson because Trump needs Johnson. Trump needs Johnson.
Point, I agree with that 100%. On that point, I think President-elect Trump would do himself a lot of good if he publicly stated, I support Mike Johnson for Speaker, and I expect expect my allies in Congress to support him as well. Period. End of sentence.
And also, if he has to strong arm a few of these people, then you do it. Listen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, Lyndon Johnson, who had his own character flaws, at least understood the art of congressional leadership and squeezing recalcitrant members to do what he perceived to be the right thing. And the right thing, as you correctly point out, because you have a man of intelligence, a man of character, a man of real wisdom and human decency, and Mike Johnson as a speaker. They are so lucky that they got Johnson after that fiasco of a couple of years ago. Kevin McCarthy was a first-rate guy and a very good speaker, and they should have kept him in place. But they had that ridiculous rule about one person can move to discharge the chair, to dismiss the chair, vacate the chair. What a stupid thing that was. That was McCarthy's mistake. He never should have gone along with that as part of a rules package. Never have that, because you're giving absolute power to one crazy, self-interested, opportunistic character like a guy like Getz and the Crazy Eight who followed him.
Let me make this observation. Trump won in a landslide, right?
Yes.
He carried all the battleground states, increased percentages amongst all kinds of demographic groups, wins the popular vote. We pick up 4 seats in the Senate. We lose seats in the House. Why? Because of this kind of craziness. And this kind
exactly
of
right, Eric.
People look at the House and say Republican House members are dysfunctional. They're nuts.
And they don't know how to govern responsibly.
They don't know how to govern. And this just feeds into that. And if the Republicans have any prayer of holding on to the House, they're going to have to come together and make some sorts of compromises with one another, and enough of this perfection nonsense. But hey, it's up to them.
Well, let me tell you. I'll tell you what also upsets me. I alluded to it earlier in our conversation. The no labels crowd. They took millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. Then they're supposed to be a countervailing force against strict partisanship. And they totally finked out on McCarthy. Not a vote came from a Democrat to support McCarthy. Not a single vote of a Democrat. And McCarthy had done everything he was supposed to do, and he worked with them in a collegial way. Similarly, Johnson has tried to work in a collegial way with the Democrats. It's a disgrace to people like Hakeem Jeffries, who wants to be a leader of an institution. How is he going to like it if he becomes speaker, if these games are played against him? They should be throwing their support to Johnson and getting the business of this country done. And loyalty to the institution of the House and loyalty to this country demands that Johnson be re-elected. And by the way, who would want this job, Eric? Who would want the job of being speaker?
Well, I ask that of pretty much any elected official why they want to go through this, but they do, and thank God they do. So we get people like Mike Johnson. To the no labels folks out there who are listening, you're a bunch of hypocrites. You really have. Who cares about you? You have, as Judge Weinberg just pointed out, you had your chance to step forward during the McCarthy vote on this for speaker, and you sat on your hands. Yeah, so please don't pretend that you're putting the country first. If you want to put the country first, then you should compromise and you should vote for the best qualified person in the majority, and you should vote for Mike Johnson. But the idea that the Democrats on the no labels Democrats will just sit on their hands or vote against Mike Johnson, it just proves you're just as partisan as anybody else. And in large part, why the no labels folks, really went nowhere and will continue to go nowhere because they appear unprincipled when it really matters. It's great to speak in all these superlatives about, we put the country first. It's really important to be in the center left and center right, where I happen to be, and I happen to think is important that we be. But when push comes to shove, we're partisans. So to the no labels folks, spare me.
And honestly, look, as you know, I supported Trump in the last election. I thought in many ways he was an excellent president. I thought Biden, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, I thought Biden was a disaster for this country and for the world. But I don't understand why Trump has not learned the lesson of retail politics. This is retail politics. You have a vision of what you want to accomplish in terms of the economy, in terms of the border, in terms of fighting the access of evil. You have a vision about being energy independent. You have all these visions. You have all these smart people that you propose for appointments to the highest positions in our country. And You don't understand that you need Mike Johnson? And by the way, doesn't he understand that the job of the leaders of the House of Representatives and the leaders of the Senate are not to be rubber stamps to the presidency, his presidency or anybody else? They have their own constitutional and legal responsibilities to protect and preserve this country, just as he does as president. Do not undermine Mike Johnson. Get off of this retail naivete.
A really important point, and I'm glad you raised that, and I think it bears repeating. When the people of the United States voted for Donald Trump in record numbers, they did not simultaneously vote for the dissolution of the Senate and the House. They continue to have very important roles to play. Matt Gaetz is a perfect example. He would have been an unbelievable disaster. It would have been a horror show. So they helped save Trump from himself.
Exactly.
The Senate has a very important role to play, and the House has a very important role to play. It doesn't, to your point, does not create a rubber stamp. People need to be principled. They need to put the country first. And in most cases, overwhelmingly, the Republicans in the House and the Senate are going to support what Donald Trump is trying to do because the agenda is virtually identical. But there are some things where there's going to be some differences of opinion. And the House and the Senate need to be heard, and they need to carry out their duties. John Thune is the new Senate majority leader in the Senate, and Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. Their obligation is to their institutions, and the country will be best served, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump, will be best served if they continue to carry out their duty by putting their respective institutions first. So all these people that are saying, if you don't agree with us or if you don't support everything Trump wants to do or every nominee, we're going to primary you. Congratulations. You'll be in the minority in 2026 and you'll be the minority party in 2028.
And you'll watch all the disasters of a left-wing party that has no commitment to common sense governance once again in positions of power, because that's what happens. You're handing it over to the radical left extremists of the Democratic Party who are running this Democratic Party today.
Well, as we know, politics is a horseshoe. It's not a straight line. There's a lot in common that the radical right and the radical left have in common, and they both lead to chaos. Well,
let's take a break, Eric. We'll be back in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen of our audience, please stay with us. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Chairman Jesse Garcia is out for the Christmas holidays. We're joined with our good friend, the noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, Eric Levine. Stay with us for more important and interesting conversation in our next segment.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree?
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet?
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Hey, guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, You can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Jesse Garcia, Chairman of the Republican Party in Suffolk County and Vice Chair of the State Party, is out today for the Christmas holidays. With me is Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, and a very good friend. So, I want to raise this issue with you, Eric, because I'm just astounded by it and frightened by it and deeply, deeply, deeply troubled by the whole Biden mental competency scandal. And it was a scandal. People knew exactly, people were dealing with him, insiders knew, the family knew, congressional leaders knew, the White House staff did, the Democratic Party, and they all knew, and they knew early. They knew as early as April of 2021. And I submit to you, Eric, that they knew during the campaign of 2020, which is one of the reasons they buried him in the basement and hid him out. And they used the COVID crisis as their cover story. So they all knew. They all violated their responsibilities to this country. As a result of violating their responsibilities to this country, we had bad governance with all the bad things that happened during the Biden-Harris administration. Kamala Harris particularly is at fault, and Jill Biden is particularly at fault. Kamala Harris had a constitutional obligation under the 25th Amendment to alert everybody to what was going on and to put the mechanism in place to get him off center stage and control. All the mistakes that were attributable to the Biden administration clearly had to do with mental incompetency as well as bad judgment. And which is one and which is the other, I can't tell you. But the Afghanistan withdrawal, where he was out of pocket and they couldn't get to him, and his stubbornness and his adamancy about how that was to be handled, and allowing, $60 billion worth of equipment and military equipment to be left behind on a base that never should have been abandoned. All that then spun out, as you've correctly pointed out, Eric, spun out to engaging the world in chaos. The groups that bore us ill, united, they made their moves. The Ukraine war came out of that. The aggression by Hamas came out of that. The threat to Taiwan came out of that. All came out of from an international sphere because they realized, our enemies realized the obvious, while the family, the politicians, the Vice President of the United States covered it up. What say you?
So I have a slightly different spin. Mine is actually even scarier, because part of the reason why it was somewhat easy to cover up, and I agree with you, there was a cover up going back years, is that there was not much of a difference between him between his governance in the state of dementia and what the Barack Obama team that surrounded him advanced as policy. So if you want to say that the Biden policies were driven by dementia, so were the Obama policies, because all he did was implement the Obama policies. And what's Obama's excuse? So I think there are a lot of scary things that flow from this. One is you have Jill Biden, who was actually encouraging her husband to run for re-election. You had to rip the White House Christmas tree out from under her in order for her to finally say, all right, maybe we'll have somebody else. But even after all this, everybody knew that he was suffering from dementia, that they wanted him to still run for president. I mean, what does that say? I mean, what it really says is that people are wedded to their positions of power. Antony Blinken wants to be Secretary of State. Mayorkas wants to be the border czar. Kamala Harris wants to be vice president. So all these people want, Jake Sullivan wants to be national security advisor. Failures all. But they were more interested in maintaining their titles than in serving the country. Now, Kamala Harris is an interesting person in all of this because she technically would be the beneficiary if she were to invoke the 25th Amendment. Now, the problem with invoking the 25th Amendment is she would be implemented, but then it would require the votes of the cabinet members. And these are the same cabinet members that want to hold on to their positions of power. So Kamala's hands were somewhat tied. All she would be seen as was, you know, she's betrayed the president. She's disloyal. She's a Benedict Arnold. So she didn't want to have to deal with that. So she let it ride out. And in exchange for that loyalty, when Biden finally stepped aside, he picked Kamala Harris to be the nominee. Now, of course, the Obama-Pelosi plan, as we understand it, as these things become as the layers of this onion are unraveled, they wanted Senator Kelly from Arizona to be the nominee, but Biden was I'm going to step aside, I'm going to pick the person, and he picked Kamala. And, you know, the rest is history. But this is what happens when people stop putting the country first, when they put their own personal needs ahead of everyone else. So when Chuck Schumer and all the Democrats were rushing to impeach Donald Trump in his first term because he was putting his personal interests ahead of the country, oh my God, my head's going to explode. What a load of crap. These are people that are so self-centered and so self-absorbed, they don't even realize that they live in the United States of America. They don't care. They only care about their own personal privilege and their own personal power. And that's why we have a system of checks and balances. But the system of checks and balances really only works if there's some degree of transparency. And that's what made this so dangerous. Because you had a bunch of people throughout the administration, and with the willing participation of the media, who has a tremendous amount of blame, to cover up the fact that Joe Biden was suffering from dementia and unqualified to be president of the United States. And, you know, part of what our enemies, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, as they try to displace us as the leaders of the world, you know, displace the American world order with the world order led by tyrants, is they go around the world and they say, democracy doesn't work. Just look at the United States. You know, we were talking about our previous segment with the disaster and what's going on in the House and the election of the Speaker. You have this other example. Look, you have a president who suffers from dementia and everybody covers it up and nobody cares. So democracy doesn't work. Don't go that way. Don't go to the West. Follow our example. Kings and tyrants, that's really the way. The iron fist, the strong man, that's who we want. That's who you should want. That leads to peace and prosperity, not the American system. And the more we do this, the more we shoot ourselves in the foot, the more we appear dysfunctional, the stronger that argument gets. So this is why we need to start putting the country first. We start what's in the best interest. The first question we ask, any elected official should ask, when they're going to vote on a bill, when they're going to propose a policy, is how does it impact the country? Does it make the country better? Does it make the country stronger? Does it help its citizens? Not does it give me attention? Not do I get more money for me? Not does it guarantee my reelection? It's does it serve the United States of America? We used to have that, and there's still some people, there's still some vestige of that, as we were talking about, like Mike Johnson in the last segment. But it's becoming rarer and rarer. And the more rare that becomes, the more danger the country's in.
I agree with that. Let me ask you this question. Can President Trump's second term be more successful than his first term? I want it to be successful because all the challenges and all the threats to America and the need to get back to basics of governance and responsibility and the American-led world order and energy independence and safe borders, a strong economy, a country where people believe in the integrity of our institutions and who love our country. All this is necessary. It has to be resurrected. It has to be won again because we've lost it in the last 4 years. And when I see what's going on with the Mike Johnson situation, that scares me, because it seems to me that they don't understand the reality of what they need to do to be in a position to accomplish great results. So I ask you, will the second Trump term be more successful than the first?
Will it be? I don't know. Can it be? Yes. I think Donald Trump has a very unique opportunity. I mean, history always has the last laugh. There's a great irony here. Donald Trump actually has the potential to be a unifying force if he uses the office wisely. He won by large numbers, popular vote, electoral college. His policies are generally pretty popular. It was the man that people had problems with. It was the personality that people had problems with. If he could take a step back, if he could reflect, if he can temper some of the things he says and how he says them while still advancing the same policies, I think he could grow his majority. I think he could help unify the country. And the short answer to your question is, I really think he can, if he can find a way to communicate with the country and help unify the country. And I think part of what would be really helpful is if the administration and the jury is still open. We're not sure which way is going to go on this. If the administration just focuses on the future, on on advancing his policies, and rebuilding the military, securing the border, bringing down inflation, lowering tax rates, deregulation, drill baby drill, ending DEI and social justice. If he focuses on that, and don't focus on punishing your quote unquote political enemies, which I know within his inner circle there is some sentiment for that. If you could stay away from that and focus on policy and improving people's lives, I think his second term could be wildly successful.
I agree, and I'm very hopeful about that. So while we're closing out this segment, I just want to ask you then, what would you describe, in your view, as the biggest challenges facing this new administration as it goes forward?
Well, internationally, I don't think there's any doubt the biggest challenge is the new axis of evil of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. We need to confront that. We need to reassert the American-led world order. We need to draw a line in the sand and say we're not going anywhere. And that requires us to stand with our allies like Israel, full throat, end of sentence, we're with Israel. We need to weaken our enemies. We need to end the nuclear ambitions of Iran. Now is the time to attack Iran. It's on its heels. It's weak. It has no defense against an Air Force attack or ballistic missiles. Take out their nuclear facilities. Take out the weak leg in the new axis of evil. Send a message around the world that America stands with its allies and is prepared to assert power around the globe to advance its interests. So I think that's one, and that requires also rebuilding the military. Our military is simply not currently capable of meeting the threats that face it. China were to invade in Taiwan, I don't know whether we be capable to defend Taiwan or be resilient enough in the event that China takes Taiwan. But there has to be a deterrent. People need to be afraid of the United States. So we'd have to rebuild the military. So that's internationally, I think that's the most important.
And domestically,
ironically is the wrong word. I happen to think we need to. I think the strong social justice and diversity, equity, inclusion, and the evils that flow from that are really important, because as long as we're teaching our children to be suspicious of their neighbors, to hate America, to undermine the American system, the American-led world order from home, there's no way we can solve our problems going forward. We need to teach our children to love our country. We need to teach our children to love and respect their neighbors and not be suspicious of them or want to undermine the country they live in that has given them so much. So I think that may be the single most important agenda item for this administration, because if you can solve the social justice, let's just apply it to certain policies. Taxes. What are taxes supposed to be for? Taxes are supposed to be for raising money so government can function. That's the traditional view of taxes. Under the social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion agenda,
Redistribution.
It's all about redistribution of wealth.
Exactly.
The coercive redistribution of wealth, pitting one social group or one ethnic group against another, just taking from one and giving to the other, with the idea that there's only a pie is so large, but it can't get larger, so we need to redistribute wealth, rather than implementing policies
that grow the pie.
That grows the pie and makes everybody wealthier. Would we rather have gradations of wealth or equality of poverty? So I think that's just one example. Education. You have a young child sits in school, and a white male sits in school, and he gets to hear that he's evil simply because he's a white boy, or a Jew that goes to a college campus. They're evil because they're Jewish. They're white. They're oppressors. Enough of this oppressor-oppressed nonsense. It is ahistorical. There are good people and bad people who are blacks, who are whites, who are browns, who are Indians, who are Jews, who are Catholics, who are Christians. Everybody needs to be treated with dignity and respect. It's all about equality. It's the Martin Luther King model. Judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. And if we can get back to that, if we can overcome the social justice nonsense, I think domestically a lot of the problems just by a domino effect will help be solved.
Very well said. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party is out on Christmas holiday. With me is noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. Please stay with us. We'll be back in a few moments for the final segment of this week's Let the Record Show.
This is Let the Record Show.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in a moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Life can be chaotic. If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment add to the chaos. Use ShipStation instead. With ShipStation, you never have to worry about shipping and fulfillment again. Whether you're running a business out of your garage or you have multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your business's growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating repetitive tasks. Plus, you'll save money with the best shipping rates from global carriers. ShipStation's industry-leading features help you deliver a better customer experience. They'll get accurate and faster shipments along with automated tracking updates with your branding. And with up to 88% off UPS and USPS rates and up to 90% off FedEx rates, ShipStation is the fastest and most affordable way to ship. Calm the chaos. Switch to ShipStation today. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back on Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, is out on Christmas holiday. With me is noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, our good friend, Eric Levine. So I want to focus more in depth on some of the national security, foreign policy, world peace issues that confront us, Eric. So, Trump famously said during the campaign that he could solve the Russian-Ukrainian war within 24 hours. Now, I know that was campaign hyperbole. I know that he thinks he has a special relationship with Putin and they understand each other and are two tough guys. And I know Trump is famously transactional and wants to make a deal. The problem is that Putin is very transactional too, and he knows how to make a deal, and he's not interested in giving back any territory he's gobbled up. Not during the territory he gobbled up when Obama was president, certainly not the territory he gobbled up since Biden gave the signal a minor, small incursion was no big deal, go to it. And Biden took him at his word and gobbled up, 40% of Ukraine territory? I don't know what the exact number is. A fantastic amount of territory and very valuable territory. Because Ukraine is rich in natural resources, and this is very important for Putin's regime to gobble that up and control that. I also know his cover story was he was afraid Ukraine was going to join NATO, and NATO was a threat to him. NATO is not in the business of aggressive wars. Russia, under Putin, are guilty of aggressive wars. Crimea, Georgia, other places. They're interested in resurrecting the great Soviet Empire or the Russian Empire. I'm not quite sure Putin sees himself as resurrecting the Communist Empire or he's the czar of the 21st century. In either event, what he wants is hegemony for Russia. He feels somehow that they've been disrespected by the West, and they're a great empire, and they should be in control. The irony, of course, is the longer the Ukrainian war goes on, the weaker Russia becomes an independent force and more dependent it becomes on outside influences, for example, China. Obviously, in my humble opinion, Eric, China is the big brother in the partnership between China and Russia. I think the longer it goes on, the more it hurts Putin. I don't think Putin will ever stop until somebody puts a bullet in his brain or he dies of natural causes. I think he's locked in to this mentality, and I don't know how Trump can solve this in 24 hours or in 24 months. So, but what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would agree with you. I think if you really analyze the Biden approach to the war and the Trump approach to the war, rhetorically, they may be different, but at the end of the day, I think they were both posturing for a resolution that would involve Ukraine ceding some of its territory to Putin and the Russians in exchange for a Russian promise to go this far and no further, and in particular to not cross into NATO. The problem is you can't trust Putin no matter what he says. I mean, let's remember in 1994, it wasn't Putin, but in 1994, Russia, the UK, and the United States guaranteed Ukrainian integrity in exchange for the Ukrainians giving up their nuclear weapons.
And how did that work out?
Yeah, exactly. And at the time, I think they were the third maybe the fourth, but I think the third largest nuclear power
I think so.
in the world.
And it had the second best military in Europe.
So it certainly, just as an aside for a second, the lesson there isn't lost on the Ayatollah. He knows that he can never give up his nuclear program if he wants to survive, if he wants his regime to survive, which is another reason why we should be attacking Iran's nuclear facilities now. But putting it aside for a second, I don't think anybody could get the guarantees from Putin that you're going to need, that he's going to go this far and no further. So I'm not sure how you solve this, even if Ukraine were to say, we'll never join NATO, we'll never join the European Union, we'll just kind of hang out there and be at the tender mercies of the Russians. The Ukrainians can't agree to that, because eventually that country will fall, and Russia takes over that way. So, I mean, this is why I always thought, minority on this, I acknowledge that. This is why I always thought when the war first started that there should have been no weapon system off limits to the Ukrainians, that and no limits on their ability to use them. I mean, with the exception of maybe nuclear weapons, but no limits on their ability to use them, so that they could credibly really push back the Russians and not just, fight to the status quo, but win. I mean, if Russians are dying and Americans aren't, we're winning. And if the Ukrainians are willing to fight for their homeland, which they are, why aren't we supporting them? The major problem with the Biden approach was that it was always $1 short and a day late. And when he sent the weapons, there was always a limit on how they could use them, because while he didn't want Ukraine to lose, he was damn sure he didn't want Ukraine to win.
I agree.
And that's why, so you get these stalemates. And so people in Congress, members of Congress, just got tired of saying, why are we sending billions of dollars to Ukraine when there's no victory in sight? So I really think the West has to start getting back to this concept of winning wars, define what victory is, and then do what is necessary to achieve the goal. We don't do that. We fight to these standstills, and this is what you have in Ukraine. But to your original question, can Trump end the war? I don't think so. I think Putin is going to keep pushing, because Trump has given the indication that he's going to cut off Ukraine, and Putin hears that message, and he thinks that if he keeps pushing, and if Trump does indeed cut off Ukraine, then Ukraine does fall.
And if Ukraine falls, you're going to have dominoes going down, and this is a real domino theory.
Then if Ukraine falls, then he may start putting a toe into NATO, and because there are some who think that Trump won't support NATO, and because it's always been, since the end of World War II, it was always the Soviet goal, and ultimately now Putin's goal, to destroy NATO, to divide NATO, and I think he's going to try and press that. So Trump has to be very careful. I would ask Donald Trump to rethink his support for Ukraine, and that there's a lot of mileage in America's national interest that to just run Russia into the ground, to your point. And China is the big brother, and Russia is the little brother. And maybe at some point we're going to want to try and wean Russia away from China, but we're not going to do it if Russia is winning. We're not going to do it if Russia is on the march. Russia needs to think that they're better off dealing with the West and becoming part of the West, and dealing with the United States and integrating into the Western economy, than depending on the Chinese, who have their eyes on portions of disputed territory between the Russians and the Chinese. It's a very complicated issue, but I just don't think that maybe it exists. I'm just not seeing I'm not seeing the off-ramp right now in Ukraine.
All right, let me switch geography with you. The question I pose now is, can Trump bring a measure of peace to the Middle East? I think my problem with the Middle East is this. It's a series of so-called nation states that really didn't have a community of interest. It was created after World War I. People were cutting deals. They're dividing up the map. The leaders in that agenda were England and France. They're creating false nation states, different religions, different cultures, different tribes. You have different religions there. Even amongst the Muslim community, you have different sects. You have the large Sunni and Shiite sects that oppose each other. You have the Alawites. Then you have other people. You have
it's endless. The list of minorities in that part of the world is endless.
Yeah, and then you have the Kurds, and let's not forget the Christians who are being driven out, even though it was the Christians and Jews who were really the forebears of the Middle East. Okay, so the point is that how do you bring peace to that kind of place? Now you add on to that, Eric, the fact that notwithstanding the rhetoric of some of our politicians here in the United States, including President Bush the Jr. and certainly Obama and certainly Biden, there's something fundamentally flawed in the thinking of some of the Muslim people. They say it's mostly a peaceful religion. Well, but there are tracts in the Quran and certainly in the ideological tracts, the political movements, that show that they have a lust for power, a lust for hegemony, a lust for control, a lust for one single religion dominating the world. This is very serious. Whether it's a political ideology or a religious ideology, if one using the other, I don't have the answer who's using who. I don't think it matters. I think a lot of people there are wedded to this ideology of control, of power, of submission to these groups by using the mechanism of the sword. This is a real problem. So the question is, how do you bring a measure of peace to the Middle East? I think you have to do it by having a real hard, cold, realistic look at what you can do and what you can't do. I do not believe you can bring democracy to the Middle East. I think you have to just have spheres of influence, and you have checks and balances and some measures of containment. And it's related to the other question: what should Trump and Israel and the West be doing to defeat this Islamic terrorism? So in the last few minutes we have, Eric, I asked you those questions. What can Trump do to bring a measure of peace, and how is that related to the threat of Islamist terrorism and the hegemonic ambitions of these countries? Your thoughts?
Well, first, I would say I think I disagree with you a little bit on Islam. I mean, certainly as it relates to political Islam, which is at the core of the radical Islamic terrorist movements, I agree with you. But a majority of Muslims internationally, an overwhelming majority, are indeed peace-loving people. But I think the danger is radical political Islam, whether it's a Sunni led by Al-Qaeda or the Shiite led by Iran. That's truly the danger. Can Donald Trump bring peace to the Middle East? He certainly can. There is an example of Donald Trump having a huge success. And what's the best way to bring it about? You're not going to bring total peace because, as you point out, you have all kinds of sects and radicalized groups that have no interest in peace, who exist for the purpose of just killing. But the Abraham Accords, Saudi Arabia was very close to recognizing the state of Israel and entering the Abraham Accords. That would have revolutionized the world, and I still think it's possible. They were going to make a full peace with the Israelis. They were going to exchange ambassadors, full international relations. They were going to have a relationship along the lines that Israel has with the UAE, which is full integration and economic co-investment. And so I think that ends the Arab-Israeli conflict for all time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all radical groups go away. So what happens on October 7th, and part of the reasons why peace seems to be a little bit further away with Saudi Arabia, is because of the Biden administration. What are the two things that they did? The first thing they did when Joe Biden became president was he tried to ostracize Saudi Arabia and humiliate Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, the leader of Saudi Arabia, and alienates them, pushing them further away. And then when it dawns on him, all right, maybe it'd be helpful if you bring down oil prices, and maybe the Abraham Accords weren't so horrible, very late to the day, he starts bringing in Saudi Arabia, getting closer to Saudi Arabia. But in the meantime, what has he also done? He's given Yemen to Iran, where the Houthis are. So the policy of appeasement with Iran, of giving them billions of dollars, not enforcing sanctions, constraining the Israelis, empowering Hezbollah, and in particular, this emphasis on the creation of a Palestinian state, which will be destabilizing and has no chance for success, made it almost impossible now for Saudi Arabia to say we will enter the Abraham Accords without also saying we need a Palestinian state. On October 6, 2023, there was no condition for a Palestinian state by Saudi Arabia for them to enter the Abraham Accords. Now all of a sudden there is, because Saudi Arabia cannot appear to be less supportive of the Palestinians than an American president. It was a terrible mistake. So part of the brilliance of the Abraham Accords is it put the Palestinian issue to the side and solved the other problems first. Because the reason why there's no peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians is really a very simple one. There is no Palestinian leadership that is willing to accept the existence of a Jewish state of Israel within recognized international and secure borders. When there is, then perhaps there will be a Palestinian state. Until there is such leadership, there is not a prayer that that's going to happen. Nobody wants a Palestinian state except for progressives, democratic progressives.
Well,
Hamas doesn't want one.
No, I have to say, it seems to me that because we have to wrap this up for today, but it just seems to me, above everything else, if Trump isn't going to be successful in dealing with Islamist terrorism and bring a measure of peace to the Middle East, the wake-up call has to be the Obama-Biden policy of appeasement of Iran has to end. The giving them money, giving them sanctions relief, letting them go forward with a nuclear program has to end. The funding of terrorism has to end. And I believe that the only way you get that done is you have to have regime change in Iran. I think if you have regime change in Iran, that then becomes the predicate for everything else that you need to have. Your final thoughts on this?
Well, I think first thing we have to do is take out the nuclear facilities, nuclear program once and for all that has no prayer of ever being reconstituted. Once we do that, it's highly likely that the regime falls. But that's up to the Iranian people. As long as Iran is neutered, that's all we really care about. And I think if we could show that sort of, if the United States can show that sort of fortitude, that will give the Saudi Arabians and Muslims around the world, Singapore, for instance, Malaysia, the courage to make peace with the Israelis, full peace with the Israelis. I agree with you that the link is Iran. I just don't know that it's necessary for the regime to be toppled first. But what is critical is that the United States show that it stands shoulder to shoulder with Israel. Because as long as the United States stands shoulder to shoulder with Israel, that there's no space between the two of us, and Saudi Arabia and the other Arab countries around the world and Muslims around the world realize that their ticket to a better relationship with the United States and prosperity by working with the United States runs through Jerusalem, as long as they understand that, then you're going to have peace. Then you're going to have peace. But we've got to be prepared, to your point, which I agree with 100%. The United States must be prepared to militarily attack the Iranian nuclear program, and there is no time like the present.
I agree with that. Well, Eric, I want to wish you a healthy and happy New Year. To our good friend and esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Political Party. We miss him this week. We look forward to being with him again next week. We, on behalf of Chairman Garcia, Eric Levine, and myself, I want to wish all of our listeners a healthy and happy New Year, and only the best for you and your families. We thank you for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed this week's segment of Let the Record Show. God bless you, and God bless your families, and of course, God bless America. Thank you very much.
This is Let the Record Show.